It's pretty easy to build a gaming PC that can play games in 1080p for less than $400. But can we build a PC that can play AAA titles at 1440p or maybe even 4K? Let's give it a shot. Hey there, my name's Jace. I've made a few budget builds in the past. We've gone as low as $200 for a rig that will play games at 1080p with pretty good frame rates. But at this point, 1080p is easy. Most esports games can be played 1080p 100 FPS for basically nothing. So I wanted to shoot my goals a little higher and aim for 1440p and 4K. Now, expecting 4K resolution and 120 FPS on something like Cyberpunk 2077 is kind of unrealistic on a very, very low budget. But if we can game comfortable at 1440p and maybe hit 4K 60 FPS while on low settings, I'd be very happy. That kind of PC will be able to sustain someone for a long time and be fantastic at other tasks like video editing or 3D graphics rendering. And if I really wanted to save some money, I could just grab a boring $30 case and call it a day, but I wanted to at least make this build a little flashy because after all, most people want a cool looking computer, whether that means RGB, custom paint jobs, or a kind of a fancy looking case. The 011 Dynamic from Lian Li has been an Instagram classic for a few years now. That's the case that has like a see-through glass front panel and all the fans and stuff. But that is a little out of our price range, so we're going to go with a copycat / clone from DIY PC. This is the ARGB Q3W, which was available last week on Newegg for $60, but has gone up a few bucks for the white version. But the black version is still pretty cheap. This was very recently released from DIY PC, and honestly, looking at it, it does look like a very convincing 011 clone for less than half the price, and it comes with 3 ARGB fans, a pretty amazing value for a very striking case. The build quality is pretty good for the price, although it's pretty clear that this is still a budget case. I think for $60 it's a pretty great bargain, but they are already starting to slowly raise the price, so unless you are dead set on this fish tank look, please don't overspend. Thinking about the processor and motherboard, the classic budget combo is an i3-10100F and then a cheap LGA 1200 motherboard, but I wanted something just a little more powerful and a motherboard that has some creature comforts like 4 DIMM slots and Wi-Fi. Okay, look, those might be standard for some of y'all, but at the bottom end of the budget barrel, things like built-in Wi-Fi and having 4 RAM slots instead of 2 is an absolute luxury. So I went ahead and got this classic Micro Center deal that has been going on since Black Friday, albeit at a slightly higher price than then. It includes a Ryzen 5 3600 and a compatible motherboard, the Gigabyte B450 DS3H Wi-Fi, all together for $130. But luckily, I had a family member pick it up and they were able to use the new customer coupon to get $25 off their purchase, bringing the CPU and motherboard combo down to just $105. The DS3H Wi-Fi is kind of an entry-level to mid-range motherboard, I'd say. It's not as cheap as something like an A320, which usually never has Wi-Fi, only 2 RAM slots and some pretty measly I/O. But it also doesn't have all the bells and whistles like 4 M.2 slots or anything crazy like that. But with some reasonable VRM cooling, Gen 3 NVMe M.2 support, and Wi-Fi built into the motherboard, I think it's the perfect middle ground for what we're doing here today. And it's paired with the Ryzen 5 3600, an incredibly popular CPU over the years for its amazing price to performance. It's a 6-core 12-thread CPU and is able to boost up to 4.2 GHz. It's unlocked for overclocking if that's something you're into, and it even comes with a pretty reasonable cooler for free. Nice. The 3600 is more powerful than what we're going to use it for today, so putting a more powerful GPU would be an easy upgrade down the line. In these types of videos, it's easy to get bogged down and only think about the price and how much FPS it pushes in games. But we also need to remember that someone is going to use this PC day to day. There are so much more things that you do on a PC that might be helped with more cores, higher base clocks, or even more RAM. Computers are not just for playing games, so I hope this PC will come out to be a well-rounded budget build that is fun to use and also very reliable. For RAM, we just need a reliable 16 gigs of DDR4, so I went with the basic black YOLO 2x8 gig sticks running at 3600 mega transfers a second. I think 3200 would have been just fine, but AMD CPUs love fast RAM and will help us push the CPU even further. $40 for these 2 sticks brand new from Amazon. They even have an RGB variant for just a little more if you're into that. And to power all this, I got the trusty old reliable 500 watt, just kidding, nope. Today we went with a Thermaltake BM2, a 550 watt semi-modular power supply that is kind of the sweet spot right now between features, price, and its reliability on the tier list. The BM2 is comfortably C tier right now, which is generally pretty safe for a PC at this budget. BM2 is plenty reliable, and 550 watts is more than enough for us. If you're anticipating upgrading your GPU in the next year or two, then feel free to bump this up to a 700 watt variant, or something higher on the tier list. We needed some storage to put all these games, but still wanted to be relatively on a low budget. So I could easily just throw in a 128 gig SSD and call it a day, but let's be honest, 1 terabyte is kind of the minimum these days, considering games like GTA 5 and Red Dead Redemption are well over 100 gigabytes each. You wouldn't be able to survive with 128. So for this, I picked up a 1 terabyte 2.5 inch SSD from Silicon Power. It isn't the fastest SSD out there, but I got it locally for $30, which is just a little bit cheaper than new. If you're going to copy this build, please go buy a 1 terabyte NVMe Gen 3 SSD. They are basically the same price as a 2.5 inch SSD, but are much faster, more reliable, and easier to install. But I've had this sitting around and really want to use it, so in it goes. Last but finally not least is the graphics card. So in this price range, we didn't have much to play with, but I wanted to get the most powerful card for the least amount of price. Who doesn't, right? The 5700 XT is a very popular price-to-performance card that came out a few years ago. In terms of performance, it is slightly above the GTX 1080 Ti, and just does a great job overall. CyberPower PC had a great sale last month selling refurbished graphics cards, and they put out their 5700 XT for only $100, and that included free shipping. I jumped on it and it came just a few days later. It came with the original box, still in packaging, and there was even still a peel on the GPU. If you told me it was brand new, I'd believe you. This card generally goes for around $150 these days, so this turned out to be a great snag. And since our GPU and CPU are both AMD, we are able to harness that synergy and get some extra performance. Not much, but a 10% gain by just enabling Smart Access Memory, that's a win. If you're building this PC and maybe want a little more flair, you can take your CPU cooler and spray paint it white for just the cost of the paint. Or maybe get some cable extensions for $15 to make these black cables look a little cleaner. If you want a little more RGB, maybe spend $15 more to get some more fans to fill these empty slots. It probably wouldn't increase performance, but it'll just be extra insurance just in case your GPU decides to spit out an insane amount of heat. All of these things are super optional, but spending like $30 to make your PC look that much more interesting, yeah, why not? I won't include them in the price of the teardown since they don't help performance, but I'll have everything in this build in the description below if you decide to build it yourself. Let's go over some benchmarks and see how well this PC can do in 1440p or even 4K resolution. Okay, so as you can see, the 1440p capability of this card is not bad. Considering it costs $100 for the GPU, I think it does pretty well at most games out there at respectable frame rates. 4K on the other hand, needed a little work. I think that is why I wouldn't directly call the 5700 XT a 4K card, because it definitely isn't. But most of these games are like the top of the top in terms of requirements. That's why people like to use them as benchmarks, because games like Red Dead 2 and Cyberpunk are literally some of the hardest games to push your GPU. But it's not like you're playing Cyberpunk 2077 for years and years. You'll play it once and forget about it. The game that you are playing today is stuff like League of Legends, Valorant, CSGO, Fortnite, GTA 5, and all of those games can be played at 4K at pretty high frame rates. But if you're trying to play something like Cyberpunk or Hitman 3, you're going to need some help from your AMD drivers like FSR or even dynamic resolution. For those who don't know, FSR is essentially an upscaler built into your AMD card available on most of the newest AAA titles. It basically uses this feature to give you increased FPS through visual trickery rather than raw power. Free FPS on my old GPU for no extra cost? That's a win. In reality, if you are building a computer that costs less than $400, you probably don't even have a 4K monitor. Considering gaming monitors that support both 4K and high refresh rates usually cost more than this PC itself. So this video is mostly educational and theoretical. But if you do end up building this PC and you have a 1080p monitor, you're going to be able to pump some frames on it. And then maybe a year down the line, you decide to upgrade your monitor before upgrading your GPU. The 5700 XT will be able to support 1440p and 4K on all your favorite esports titles. And then when you want to play some high-octane AAA titles, you can tinker with the settings and FSR to get some respectable frame rates on a beautiful resolution. But for less than $400, we were able to build a good-looking, super functional PC that supports higher than 1080p resolution and will be super reliable for years to come. I'm going to list everything in the description, along with some alternatives if anything is out of stock. Thank you so much for watching this, and if you want to ask me any questions, feel free to comment and I'll do my best to get to everyone. If this video brought value to you, please like the video below and subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to hit 10,000 subs by the end of the year, so if you could help me with that goal, I would be super appreciative. My name is Jason. Thanks for watching.